Well, hey there, everybody. Rhonda Boyle here, and I am your SOAR online community leader, and I'm thrilled that you are here joining us today. We are here to bring you calls that inform and empower you to move forward in your life through talent development. And today, we are here to talk about women and women, especially in executive leadership, and some of the challenges that they have as they move up into the C-suite and beyond. So, and I made that up, beyond. We're not sure where they head, right? So here's the question: what makes them unique? And I have an amazing group of panelists here today, my experts, because this is their space. They work with these women and help them overcome some of these challenges. So let me first introduce them very quickly. First, we have Paige Patton. Let's open up your mic and say hey to the people. She is the founder of Glass Always Full Coaching and Consulting. She works at building strong teams and inclusive cultures and working with women who lead those. Paige, welcome to the call.
Thanks for having me, Rhonda. Great to be here.
You bet. Next, we have Wendy New. She is the founder of Crossroads Coaching and Consulting, and she partners with women build a business platform. Wendy New, say hey to the people.
Hey everyone, super excited.
Me too. And next we have Cynthia Stewart. She is the founder of Evermore Services out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. She works with C-suite women, helping them build winning cultures. Cynthia Stewart, how are you doing today?
Hi everyone, welcome.
Good to have you. And finally, we have Consuela. Where are you? Did she leave? Is she bumped off?
No,
I'm looking for her.
here.
There you are. I can't find you on the panel. So Consuela Munoz is the founder of Conquer Success Coaching and Consulting. She coaches teams on what they do best using strengths and has been in this movement for over 10 years. Welcome, Consuela. Good to see you.
Great to be here. Excited to work with these great women.
Yeah. Now, I want to start with you, Consuela, because you have a very fun and unique way of working with women. And I want to talk about whether or how they play to win. Let's talk about that and some of the work that you've done specifically around that topic.
Yeah, so playing to win. This is something that a lot of women seem to struggle with, especially when they're trying to break into that climb to the ceiling, that climb to the C-suite. And so one of the things we found with that is that women are going to be treating their work as their career and they take it personal and it's what they do, where men more instinctually treat business as a game. So when I had several women and men who we questioned around, if you started in a new role at a new place, would you go in there and try to get the win on the first day? Or would you go in there and try to take all? And men, without hesitating, will always say they want to win to take all. And women will hesitate and think about it, and then they'll pick the win-win. And I think that says something to that. We know we want to win it all, but that we more often will fall back on how our more traditional training is that, no, we should work to have a win-win situation. So as far as around coaching, the thing then is to look at how can we change that mindset around that particular thing. When you change how you think about and how you approach your work as it's a game, it can be a real game changer, if you will.
It can. And I think it's so interesting that you actually have the data that proves that women will hesitate just that slight amount. And that's something that if they do, they really need to work through that, don't they?
Definitely. And again, I can, working with a specific lady who does amazing work, working for a gentleman, she was doing amazing things. That gentleman left his position and she got pushed down a level. So she's working hard, she's doing everything right, and yet she's not getting ahead. She's actually having to take a step back. We go through her strengths, we figure out where that is, and then we change that mindset around this is a game. You know, if you've ever played a sport, if you've ever played chess, think about like that, and that can really change how you approach it and the success that you'll have.
Yeah, wow. It's important that they do so also. You know, I wonder if that has to do a lot with expectations. I know that that's another issue that women have, that they put these extra expectations on themselves, sort of like feeling something a little heavy. Wendy, how about you? Can you speak to that? You know, maybe, I don't know, what is it? Is it a lack of boundaries or social conditioning that women have that causes that?
I think, yes, that there are definitely things in our makeup and certainly in our experiences, right, that speak to how we really take responsibility for everyone versus taking responsibility for us ourselves first, and then offering up different ways for people to strategize and brainstorm their way out of solutions. It's so interesting in the women that I work with, the reaction to situations is so much about, well, what did I do? How did I cause this? And what happened here? What did I do that maybe created this situation and made it worse, and so on. And definitely with women who have especially that responsibility strength, I work a lot with them to talk about what are those boundaries, and let's break it down and figure out what is it that we need to do and think about with regard to our own mindset, just like Consuela was talking about, and our own paradigm, so that we can maybe begin to understand that we don't need to assign our own lens and our responsibility always out to everybody else, but really we can let people take responsibility for their own actions and coach them along the way.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And, you know, some of that has to do, I think, with having a lack of boundaries. That can be part of it, don't you think?
Yes, I do think that our boundaries are much more extensive. We extend ourselves out so much more than perhaps our male colleagues do. So how do we really think about what is the boundary in this particular situation? What am I trying to accomplish? What is it that I really want to experience? And what do I have control over, truly? And rather than trying to feel like we need to control everything all the time, be really intentional about controlling the things that we truly can and influencing the things that we can perhaps influence. And then there are things that we have to leave out there to the bigger, wider world that we just don't have control over, and be okay with that.
Yeah, I think that sometimes even, Cynthia, I want to come up to you real quick. Sometimes women, when they take on too much because they don't actually have a network in place of people to help them. Let's talk about that for a few minutes, because I think it's all related, don't you?
Absolutely. I work with so many women who have stepped into a top leadership role, and that's a huge expansion for them. And when they step into that role, they do seek, and I'm finding that is so true. They do seek, and they need to seek a network of peers and coaches, mentors, people that will really help them identify, like what Wendy was talking about, identify their boundaries, identify what influences they want to use, identify ways that they need to grow and how to grow into their role. And it really can't be done alone. A leader is so much better working with other people. So what I find is if people, leaders in particular, if they'll reach out and learn from what other leaders, other peers, they do so much better in their roles because they have feedback. Before they go and make a decision, they have feedback. Decisions are made in the company but the best decisions are made in the company of peers. And sometimes women have a C-suite where they can do that, but a lot of times, a lot of the owners these days that I'm working with, they don't have a group of people inside their company that they can bounce those ideas and those decisions off of. And then it's so critical for them to reach out and form form a network of women and men, of course, that can help them
Sure.
as they stretch into that responsibility.
Well, and I think sometimes even internally, finding that mentorship might be risky business. Do you think? Paige Patton, let's run up to you for just a minute. How do women manage finding the right fit, for a mentor, or what do they do even if they can't find anybody that they can trust internally?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that, Rhonda, because Cynthia, as you were talking, the way that you were saying it, I love it. You were reminding me of the phrase, create the world you want to see, right? And these women a lot of the women that I'm working with who are on their way rising into these leadership roles or newly have come into them, they're not having those mentors that have been there in that role within that organization, to give them the mentorship that they're looking for, right? And so you really have to create it, whether it's people who have been in a similar role in other organizations, or within your organization. How can you reach out and expand your network to where some of you other ladies were talking about, delegating and working with people under you? How can you create those lines of trust to where you're rising with support, even if it's not direct mentorship support?
So really, it's learn to leverage the people around you who may even be like on the same level. They don't necessarily have to be, sort of above you, if that makes sense, because really everybody has something to contribute, don't they? Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of the things, Consuelo, I liked how you were talking about the mindset and having that game mindset and shifting that a little bit. And I a lot of research points to women tend to want to feel like, okay, I've mastered this and now I'm going to rise up. And now I've mastered this level and now I'm going to move up, right? And if we as coaches, when we help them embrace, I'm going to master as I move up, that switches the mindset and allows women to bring in that network, to bring in that support, so that you're not feeling alone as you kind of master that level.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Go ahead, Jayla.
I'm going to jump in with that as far as the whole it's a game thing and talking about networking, mentor, sponsorship. This is something that men, again, instinctually do that women sometimes fall behind. One of the things that's really important to do, especially when you're rising and there aren't a lot of people in your direct company, but you should always try to develop your own personal board. Think about this is your board, and your board is who you're going to go to with all your questions. So there are peers in your industry, in a different industry, but always whatever you're trying to achieve, whatever big goal you're going after, have your own board and have a wingman, have somebody there that can support you and you can run everything by if you need to get that unbiased opinion about where you're going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes you just need somebody to tell you you're doing it all right. Right?
Well, when you think about support in that aspect also, how many women go to networking events and feel like you have to be so buttoned up because it's networking, right? Because you're representing yourself and your company. So all those insecurities, all those struggles, you can't talk about it in a networking environment. So yeah, like what you're saying, Consuela, getting your board, right? Finding those mentors elsewhere. Mastermind groups are amazing. I've been a part of so many different groups where all of a sudden the women can take their leadership hat off for a second and breathe and just be in that space together where they can really learn from each other, share their struggles, and feel like they're rising with support, not necessarily in a black hole.
Mm-hmm. And women really need that. I notice that men affiliate very naturally in all kinds of groups, almost more naturally than women, which is really surprising to me. But as I began to coach women, I was surprised at how many were isolating themselves and trying to do it on their own. And, it's so funny because I think often of our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers who did quilting circles, and they got together so that they could learn, and also church circles and things like that. They got together so they could learn from each other. And I work so much with women business owners or who are founding their own companies. And so many of them isolate themselves. It surprises me. But that is so, so, so important to recognize that you learn from each other. So get your peers, get your board of advisors, put them together. And that's the best way to learn into your role, besides just doing what you do every day.
So I'm wondering if this is where that imposter syndrome comes from, the idea of that women, several of you have said it, that they isolate themselves, or they can't find the right mentorship wherever they are. They need to build all of that. And then I think that this causes that insecurity, which now it goes by that name, imposter syndrome. Am I kind of onto that? Yeah, Paige, let me hear from you real quick, because I know that's something that you have seen a lot of.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I can just say, I think we all have it.
Oh, I've definitely been there multiple times in multiple roles.
Yes, right?
I think it stems from a lot of different areas, but one of the things that I think is really interesting is if you can keep your mindset in the lane of playing to your strengths, right? So as we're rising, and like what I was saying with not falling into that trap of feeling like you have to excel and be perfect in, let's say, like your manager level before you get to the next level, before you get into leadership or C-suite, right? So not feeling like that has to be perfected, because it's never going to be. And I think that holds a lot of women back. And so if you can, and that's where the imposter syndrome can come from. That's one of the ways, right? I haven't earned this. I haven't experienced enough. I haven't checked off enough boxes, et cetera, et cetera. But if you can play to your strengths, you can use how you naturally think and behave to your advantage to navigate your way there. And so one example is I've been working with this one woman who, she really naturally checks off boxes so well. She has her list. She knows what she needs to do. And she keeps reminding herself, I will learn on the job. I will learn on the job. And if you can stay in that mindset and do it in the way that works for you, right? For her, it's making the list and feeling like she has achieved all the boxes off of her list, all the lines every single day. But if you can stay in that mindset, I will learn on the job, and then bring what we were talking about, the network, in with you, that's going to help a lot with overcoming those insecurities.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, Cynthia. Hang on, because I do want to go talk about that learning curve, which I know that you really want to cover. But Wendy, before we do that, it's a lot about communication and finding your strength voice, which is something that Paige just mentioned a minute ago. So let's talk about that for just a second, and how we find the way to communicate from a point of strength that is not the point of aggression, which is what, some women are charged with.
Yeah, we're naturally wired to communicate in ways that our strengths dictate, right? Mm-hmm. So what happens, especially in leadership roles in the traditional C-suite, we often think that the only way to communicate is to be direct, aggressive, and really go through the motions of a traditional style of leadership that we grew up with. And honestly, that is more damaging in many cases today than I think ever before to the people around us. Mm-hmm. So when we try and find our communication style or our communication strength, we can really look to those different domains that we talk about a lot in our strengths work. About we can be direct and verbal, and we can really be influential, but is it coming across in a way that's going to positively impact somebody, or is it going to negatively impact? And so really stepping back from a situation before we even start the situation at hand, and being intentional about what that looks like, what it could look like, how we can communicate and get our goals and points across to all different styles of people who may not be like us or as our leaders, right? Because not everybody is aggressive or direct or verbal. There are some who are thinkers. There are some who really need to build relationships. So wherever people are, if we step back and say, how can we meet them where they're at first before we communicate and really dive into a style of communication that might not be to our advantage, or it's an old style of communication that doesn't work very well. I think it certainly helps to change that mindset that we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm. And that does take time, right? So there's a learning curve there. And Cynthia, that's it, right? Sometimes women put a lot of pressure on themselves, especially at the beginning with that learning curve that you have to go through. And then you have all the responsibility piled onto it. Let's talk about that for just a few minutes.
I was really glad when Paige said that shifting from that idea of being an imposter to I'm learning every day on the job, because really it is, again, another shift in mindset. And the thing about it is that if you recognize where you need to learn, what you need to learn, and you start a path towards that, it's so much better just to say, I'm learning, I'm learning, I'm learning. And I think the reason people have this imposter syndrome is because they think they're supposed to be something they aren't. So tying into what Wendy's saying, it's best to really understand what strengths you're bringing to the table, your specific talents, and just pursue those and recognize where you have gaps and you need to look for other people, because it's those gaps, those learning gaps, that really create that learning curve. If you're not recognizing where you need to go in that learning curve and trying to jump as quickly as you can through that learning curve, and remember, we learn in company with others. So you'll need to be learning with your employees, with your advisors, with your board, with your peer group. Those are the ways that you learn and get over that learning curve. And it's so high, especially when you are starting a business. Mm-hmm. And we try to do way too many things when you start a business. Been there, done that. But when you think about somebody in the C-suite, they have a board. They have to learn the board and the board's expectations. They likely, if they're stepping into a role, they have to learn the role. They have to learn the customers and clients and the relationships there. They have to learn their employees. So it's pretty big. It can be daunting. So the main thing is to say, I'm in a learning mode. I'm going to be in a learning mode for a while. Welcome learning, and find those people you can learn from and with. And that's how you get through that learning curve in a way that you can move very quickly.
Yeah, I think another one too is to be aware that you have blind spots, and that's okay. Those blind spots are really the opportunity to partner with someone else. Wouldn't you say so, Consuela?
Definitely. I think that's one of the greatest thing about strengths, is knowing that you don't have to be the greatest at everything. You're great at what you are, and somebody else is great at something that you're not. So if they're on your team or you can work with them, that's one of the best ways to maximize the entire potential of the team. And that takes a lot of other issues away as well.
Mm-hmm. I have found that often, and I don't think this is just about women. I think this is about everyone. We tend to bring people around us who are like us. And what we really need is to bring people around us that are not like us. But the only issue is that they're those people. It's like we don't get them at all, and we're really not sure we like them. And, so being able to understand not just ourselves, but what other people bring can be really important, when it comes to that, helping with that learning curve that you're talking about, Cynthia, because wow, just as you were talking, I'm feeling the pressure, and that's exactly what we do. We walk into the role oftentimes feeling totally uncomfortable, but not willing to open up and let down that facade enough to be vulnerable. And because we don't think somehow it's okay, but it really is. And I think the women that excel fastest, am I right, Paige? I'll let you talk to that. They're the ones who get over that real quick, and they're able to open up and and be okay with what they don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head, Rhonda, with that word vulnerable, because I think when we are leaning into our strengths, we allow ourselves to be in that place of vulnerability because we know we are being most authentic, right? So when you can be yourself, be authentic, lead in the way that comes naturally to you, then you know you're doing it in the way that people feel it. People feel when you are being authentic, when you are using your strengths. And what I think is interesting with that is having the additional level of self-awareness and how it comes across, right? And so a lot of times with coaching, we talk about, okay, how can you be in the strength zone? Also, how can you be aware? You ladies were saying before, be aware of your blind spots, right? And then how can you be aware of how you are perceived by others? And so this one woman that I've been coaching, she was saying, I want to lead in the personality and who I am, right? And she's warm and very positive and likes to support people. And when she's with certain other personalities, and sometimes that's more from the male perspective, she is seen as naive. She's seen as, too warm and fuzzy. And like, she doesn't know what she's doing. And she's like one of the smartest women I've ever met. So she definitely knows what she's doing, right? But she's owning it. And when we had some conversations around that, and how can she be a little bit more aware of how it comes across and still live in her own authenticity, she's finding that way to do it in the way that works for her, in the way that she can, speak her truth and come across not as naive, right? Come across as the leader that she is, really.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I see that. So let me ask you a question. I think I'll start with you, Cynthia. Is there a glass ceiling?
I like to say the glass ceiling is right here.
Oh, really? Do tell. Where is that glass ceiling?
I really do believe that what we understand as we learn about our strengths is that strengths, when you really focus on developing strengths, they develop exponentially, infinitely. So the glass ceiling often is because we're trying to develop those areas where we don't have talent. Now, a lot of people say the glass ceiling is other people limiting them. And I say we limit ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
If we let others limit us, then we will be limited. So I'm not saying it never happens, but for the most part, in my experience, decades and decades in corporate America and working with small businesses and so forth and so on, we create our own glass ceiling is by believing that we are limited either by ourselves or by others. And we also create our glass ceiling by trying to do things that we really have no talent to do. So it really, I say it boils down to what's inside and bringing that out and knowing that we're wired for greatness. And if we want to pursue that greatness, we need to know how we were wired for greatness. And we need to not let other people stop us in the areas of our greatness.
Mm-hmm. I really love what you're saying. And I so agree with you about that glass ceiling, like being you. It's really the way we're thinking about or looking at the situation, I think.
I did have people who, and by the way, I had men and women who were my bosses, and I had superior women and superior men bosses, and I had really bad women and really bad men bosses. And it all depended on whether they were really looking to empower me in my role. So I had some tell me that engineers would never listen to me. I worked for an electric company. They would never listen to me. And I ended up reporting to the top engineer in the business who served 5 million customers. So, we're talking big. And he said to me, "We need to listen to you." So, one guy's saying nobody will ever listen to you, and the guy at the top is saying we need to listen to you. So It's a person to person. I just didn't listen to the one that said they'll never listen to you. I just kept doing what I was doing. And here I get the words out of the top engineer's mouth. Top engineer, engineers won't listen to you. Top engineer, we need to listen to you.
Sounds like you had the selective hearing, which served you well, Cynthia. Wendy, do you have that same feeling about that glass ceiling?
Yeah, I really like what we're saying in terms of what the glass ceiling is about, what we, our own mental model of who we are and what we can contribute. I see this all the time in the women that I work with, and we talk every single time about situations where we think that we're not contributing or that there's weakness there, and we have to work on turning that around to what is going well, how can we contribute in your strengths, and what do we need to do going forward. And it's like a muscle that needs to be built over and over again because we're so entrenched in what's wrong with everything. When we start to think about what's right with everything, suddenly that glass ceiling is going to dissipate. Because anything is possible. Anything is possible in our strengths.
Yes.
So we need to be able to really understand that the limits that we put on ourselves are self-imposed and not necessarily coming from others all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I so agree with you. And I think that we kind of put it on ourselves because, again, of how we're looking at the situation. Sometimes all we have to do is just turn around and look at it a slightly different way, and then everything changes, like Paige was mentioning a few minutes ago. You know, it's like everything I do is a beta test. That way, if I make a mistake, I'm like, well, I'll fix that the next time, right? And it is sort of, working those mind games, if you will, to manage that, because otherwise it brings on more stress. So, Wendy, let's talk about stress for a minute. Mm-hmm. What do you think, other than that? What else causes stress? What are the things that are throwing women out of alignment as they're pushing through into these executive C-suite roles?
Well, I definitely think stress is coming a lot in many ways from our own expectations of ourselves based on what we think others want. So when we feel like we are not meeting those expectations consistently day in and day out, then the stress level is just going to keep going up. And when I work with my clients, I talk a lot about, well, what are those expectations? Let's get clear. Do you know what the expectations are? And sometimes they get a look that says, no, I don't necessarily know what those expectations are. Okay, well, then let's ask. And even the act of asking is sometimes perceived as a weakness, which then stops us from asking what the expectations or what the goal is or what the outcomes need to be. So we can get clarity around what we then know we can contribute in a situation versus what we think we should be doing.
Mm-hmm. Consuela, what are your thoughts on stress? Because I think that when we talked earlier, that was one of the hot buttons for you, that you find that women who are either just entering or that are headed that way find themselves sometimes overwhelmed with stress. What is it? They're causing it themselves, you think?
They are causing it themselves, or just not really being in control as much. And so for me, it's about that. They're allowing work to control them versus them controlling their work. And so, which any of us have fallen into that trap at any time, and stress can really have a physical toll on us if we're not careful. I mean, it leads to burnout, it leads to physical conditions, symptoms that arise because the stress is too great. I know somebody was talking earlier about women who especially have responsibility strength high. At a company I was working with, a lot of women had that. And, if you have responsibility or achiever, and especially responsibility, and you say you're going to do something, you're going to get it done, you get known as the person who gets things done. And so you go from having 15 things to get done to 20 to 30, and you still feel like you have to get them done. And the issue is then that people know you as someone to get it done, you feel responsible, and soon you take on way too much. And so that's where you can be overwhelmed and out of control. And when I say control your work, I mean, I talk about, strengths is kind of like, we've been saying mindset, but to me, it's a behavioral change. And the quickest one that people associate is losing weight. So if you're on a diet and you follow all the rules, you lose weight. Yay! If you stop following the rules, you're probably not going to lose any weight. You may gain some, right? And it's the same thing with putting a focus on your strengths. It's a way for you to have control over the work that you do. And so you're doing things that you need to achieve to get to the next level. And having that control and feeling empowered from within, which is what you do when you know your strengths, that makes all the difference in how much you are overwhelmed. And therefore you have that strength, that stress under control. And one of the things, I read this quote, and of course I'm paraphrasing, it's from a while ago, but the more you do with your strengths and the stronger you are with the strengths, the less your weaknesses matter. Because if you think about it, when we were talking earlier about you're trying to get better in something that you don't really have a lot of talent in, it's not going to happen. But if you can get stronger and stronger at something that you're naturally good at, why would anyone ask you to do something that you're not good at? We need you to do what you're best at. We're going to give you more like that. And so that's how you control your work, and controlling your work helps bring that stress level down.
Mm-hmm. It's you're asking us to live in our lane, which, hello, it's our most powerful space. I think that we all should do that. We do get caught up, though.
It's a challenging thing because there's so much pressure, especially in corporate, to look at your areas of opportunity and focus on that. And so you really have to be working with a manager who understands that the level of movement that you can have on something that you're naturally strong at to great at is much farther than something you're not good at to becoming average. And if you can switch that, that's when you can really see real progress.
Yeah. Paige, Patton.
Yeah, thank you. Consuela, I love what you're saying. I just wanted to add on to that because I'm going to give a shameless plug. This is an example of everyone needs a coach, right? Because I think that when we are, playing in our lane, playing to our strengths, playing to our talents, we don't realize because it comes so naturally. We don't realize that other people can't do it naturally this way, right? And we think we should do it the way that we see modeled by other managers, other bosses ahead of us, other leaders ahead of us. And so we think that it should be harder than it needs to be sometimes. And I think that's the key, is when you can talk with someone and get that feedback of, no, do this the way you're doing it. And I know it feels easy, so it feels like you're missing something sometimes, but you're actually in your strength zone. So keep doing it that way and, kind of almost trust the process, like stay the course. Because I think that we have this false mentality sometimes that it needs to feel like a struggle. It needs to feel hard to really get there. But if you're using your natural talents, it can actually be really easy, but we don't see it because it's just like innate within us.
Mm-hmm. I so agree. It's like, it can't be real if it's that easy.
Yeah, exactly.
When the reality is our most powerful space is the one that's easiest for us, not difficult. And yet that's not what our culture tells us, that it's got to be hard. We got to work hard to get where we are. And what I'm hearing you say is, no, you just have to stay in your lane and do the best, stay in where you are naturally gifted. And it's hard for us to see ourselves as amazing as we really are in the things that we do so well. Because again, we're not, why? Because we're not looking at reality, but we're also not looking at ourselves. We're looking at everybody else around us, aren't we? And making those decisions. So here's what I'd really like to move real quick.
One thing.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
One thing real quick, and this will be quick. I love what everybody's saying, and I just want to add a little bit more. And just remember that as long go and discover your talents, because you want to use your talents and you don't want them to use you. And when you find out that a lot of your talents cause the stress, You go from self-awareness of learning about your talents to self-management. When you move into the zone of self-management, you start to release some of that stress. And I'm seeing that all over the place with people who are highly talented, highly driven, and their stress comes a lot of times from their talents that are not really aimed and developed like they need to be.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have to live there, in those zones where you don't do your best because you're trying to find somebody to outsource that or whatever. But, at least get back in your lane as soon as you can, because that is where your power is. So here's where I'd like to go now. I really want to hear some success stories, some things that you've done with people and how, like where were they struggling and what did they do once they launched over into this area? So who wants to go first?
Okay, well, I'm unmuted, so I guess I'll nominate.
You're on. There you go. You're nominated. Consuela Munoz. Fill us in on the story.
Yeah, so a lady that I was working with, again, it's that, it's around all those things, mindset change, playing work the business game, not just, this is my career and this is my life and all that sort of way that we approach it. There's a woman I was working with, and she was really felt like she had transitioned from one area to another area. And she really felt that, they still tended to treat her like she was still in her last role. And we're going through her strengths and we're using them, applying them, using them, applying them. And after about a couple months, she realized the person that was treating her that way the most was herself. And so it's really getting out of her own way. And by really applying her strength and starting using them, she went from being, I wouldn't say that she was disengaged, but she wasn't really engaged, to being highly engaged. She went from doing that, really moving that team along. They ended up getting an award because of her great ideas that were totally out of the box. And then from there, she not only did that, now she's opened up her own business. And so she's a business owner now. And so she really became completely empowered from within. And when you have that, when you know so strongly what you can do that no one else can do, there's all those obstacles melt away. And she was really an example of someone who applied her strengths consistently and really made a big leap. So.
Wow, just your confidence in telling that story, I can see her rising up, and that's exactly what we need women to do. Paige Patton, let's hear from you, ma'am.
Yeah, absolutely. My story is actually very similar to Consuela's. I love your story. I have this one woman who, again, kind of with the idea of getting in your way. Well, also, have you heard the expression, stop shoulding on me?
Oh, yes.
I love that one. I'm newer to that one, but I love it because I think that we get caught up in all the shoulds, right?
Oh, yes.
And I've been working with this one woman who shared her story with me recently where she got lost. She got lost in all the shoulds. And from, several conversations, we together were able to identify, really who she is at her core. And that helped her really she took home some of those thoughts and did the work on her own and realized, how to live in her own authenticity, how to kind of get back to who she is and what she loves. And she's so much clearer now with her path and what she wants to be, what she wants her role to be, what she wants, just really her path to be, that allows her to ignore all those shoulds and live in her true self, because really she's going to be so much more engaged and happier and successful as a leader in that way.
Absolutely. I can see that, how she got in her own way and you helped her pave that path for her. And you know what, Paige, sometimes that's all we need is a little clarity.
Yep.
She didn't know, and you were able to really help her sharpen and hone in on exactly what she wanted. And then she could step in there and live in that space. So, wow, good job. So, Wendy New, let's talk about you. How have you, or share with us a story about one of your favorite clients that has moved through up and beyond?
Yeah, one of my favorite clients was someone who, when I first started working with her, she was just ready to leave and quit the role, and she was so tired and just so angry and just everything, right? All of that. And what we discovered with her, and as she really began to learn a little bit more about herself and her strengths, was that she wasn't even remotely using her strengths.
Ooh.
She may have been using one of them to an extreme, which of course we love to talk about that being an overuse, right?
Sure.
But it was to the extent that people didn't want to talk to her or ask her questions because, whatever. So there's, how it goes. It's the same for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
What we talked about though is that if you can tap into those connecting strengths of the relationship, being able to ask people, hey, how you doing before you dive into the problem. I mean, that's how she's wired. And when she started doing that, she blossomed, and she got feedback from her team and said, this is great. You've really changed. I love how you're managing the team. I love how you're, working with others. So it made a huge difference in the organization once she understood what she's really good at, and that it's okay to be who you are and to do what you're good at.
I love it. One of the things I like to say is to, I love knowing who I am and knowing who I'm not. And letting go of that not is so freeing. And that's what happened to her. She hated where she was because she wasn't where she needed to be. And sometimes that's really all it takes, is that slight reframe. So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Cynthia Stewart, come on and share with us. I know you have worked in this space for a long time, and so fill us in.
So I was trying to decide who to talk about. If we have enough time, I'll talk about more than one, but one that I really like recently is this beautiful woman who is a photographer. And she started out in journalism and worked for the AP, Associated Press. And through those times, she really liked to tell people stories. The untold story was really her big, just untold story. And she moved that into her camera. So she's got the writing and the camera. And I worked with her recently because she was at a place in her business where her camera was really focused on families and babies and things like that. But her children are growing up, her sons are growing up. She wants more time in the evenings and on weekends when she would be doing her photography. And she thought she had to really switch things to be able to work in the business environment, because to work in the business environment meant she could work more the 8 to 5, be available for her sons before and after school and that kind of thing. So what I did is I worked with her on her strengths, and I helped her identify her purpose. So I have a little process. From your strengths, you identify your purpose. And she thought that her purpose had to be different, like her life purpose had to be different from her business purpose. What I did, and it was so simple, you guys, it's unbelievable. She came up with seek and reveal. So she liked to seek out the story and reveal the essence of people and their connections and their relationships. And I helped her see that she could take that right into business, how important connections are in business as well as in families. And she is so thrilled because she's starting to shift her business and realize that her mindset of seeing human connection in business or in family works in business as well. So just by kind of revealing what it is that she was really after and how she wanted to take that into her business from a purpose perspective and how to take that into business as a photographer, she's very freed and very excited about her future and starting to make those linkages now into linking up with businesses of people that she already knew and hadn't even thought about contacting.
Isn't that fun how sometimes we can be so myopic in our view we cannot see? And I think that that's what coaching brings to women as they maneuver in through these executive leadership roles. And did you have another story to tell? I'm going to give you 1 minute to tell it quick, Cynthia.
Well, one of my favorite clients, longtime client, I have coached her through starting a company at $150,000. It's now up to $3 million with 10, 15 people. And so she's been adding on people. And in the midst of all of that has been a buyout, a change in CEOs, and then a buyout. I mean, everything that could have changed. And she was feeling a little like she wasn't living up. And I had to tell her that she had a tornado around her. The whole company had shifted, and the only stable group in the whole company was hers. They lost 60 people in the headquarters, but she kept her 12 because she has been so focused on being a great leader and living in and through her strengths. And I was able to, she loves strengths so much, she just got her certification just to make sure that what she's bringing to her employees is really the best in terms of their strengths. Mm-hmm. And I just love that she's been this stable rock in this huge storm and just doing the best, thinking about her employees and pouring into their strengths and really creating a great environment.
Wow, she got to maintain that or continue to be that stabilizing factor during the chaos, and
incredible chaos. And didn't even really think about it. It's like I'm sitting here watching it all throw around her. Had to remind her what she had been able to keep, her group stable through all of that. It was incredible, really.
Wow.
It is strengths and pouring into her employees.
Yeah, and making sure that you're flying in the right lane or driving in the right lane, I guess I should say. Although I do think airplanes fly in lanes. But anyway, I am so glad. We're going to close out now. So happy that you joined us today to hear these amazing coaches. Paige Patton, let me introduce them again real quick. We have Paige Patton from Glass Half Full. And where's my sheet here? Right.
Glass
here.
always full, Rhonda.
There we go. Paige, sorry. Now you know I wasn't looking at my paper here. Paige Patton.
It's all good.
The founder of Glass Always Full Consulting. I'm going to connect you to each of these coaches. I will be sending you the replay if you want to listen in, tune in, find them again. Paige Patton, Wendy New, founder of Crossroads Coaching and Consulting. Cynthia Stewart is with Evermore Services out of Tulsa, and Consuela Munoz, Conquer Success Coaching and Consulting. And so happy that you joined us today for this call, which is on women as they navigate the executive landscape. We have other calls coming up that I want to tell you about. At soar.com, I believe you're all in the online community, so you should be able to take a look there and find new calls coming up. But at soar.com, we have professional coaches that cover your every need in business and life. So we have coaches that work with teams that aim for higher productivity, coaches who work with IT professionals, or maybe those in multi-generational workplaces, or maybe coaches who specialize in teens and families and marriage. And so we invite you that wherever you are in your business or life, come and take a look at soar.com, because we have the perfect coach for you. And with that, I will let you go. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today, talking about executive women as they move through the landscape of executive leadership. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Thank you. Great to be here.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.